This is The Great Debate, the weekly program hosted by Trevor Phillips on Skynews. Question is being asked about the challenges of the UK migration issue, people crossing the channel, and is Suella Breaverman, after breaching ministerial code, the right person for the job?
40,000. The government's now spending £6.8 million a day housing asylum seekers in hotels. There's a surge in illegal migration from Albania, and the plan to process people in Rwanda has been stalled in the courts, with campaigners claiming it's immoral. So, what should be the way forward if there is one? Let's talk to Charles Quay. Charles, you're in Clacton-on-Sea in Essex.
Yes, hello, Trevor.
Good evening, Charles. What's your view?
Good evening, Trevor. I mean, what I want to say is that Rishi Sunak spoke about integrity and accountability, but shortly afterwards appointed Suella Breaverman as Home Secretary, a few days after she was being struck by Les Truss for breaching ministerial code. Suella Breaverman, I think, must be forced to resign. She's a barrister and also a former Attorney General. Now, would it be right to say that she should deal with her own false appointment into office before she attempts addressing British migration issues and the Govt Rwanda Scheme?
Okay, Charles, as ever, not mincing your word. Let's see if we can find another point of view. Let's see if Griselda Basu, no old friend of the program. Griselda, you're in Altrincham. What's your thought about what Charles has just said? Pretty hostile to the government.
In my opinion, the Rwanda scheme should work if it's given a chance. As a country, it has shown to be progressive. Other countries in the past has been through the type of war that Rwanda experienced in the 1990s and 94 to 94. And those countries are functioning on the global stage. I think that there are organisations who do not want to promote Africa in a good light. Suella Breaverman, the Home Secretary, is the right person to make the Rwanda scheme work.
Okay, thank you, Griselda. Putting that view forward is courageous, if nothing else. Natalie, Elphicke, Rwanda's not got lots of supporters on our wall.
Well, I think what we've got to see is it was part of a package of measures brought forward to try and tackle this issue. And as we've seen, 40,000 people now have come into the country through the small boats routes. This has been increasing year on year. It's become increasingly difficult to deal with the process backlog, as we've discussed. And so, the idea behind this is to make sure that people are looked after safely in line with our obligations, but also to make sure that they can be processed quickly so we can deal with some of those backlogs that we've got. But at the moment, it's stuck in the courts. It's, people who don't like it have held it up in the courts, and we don't know how long that's going to take. It could be months, it could be more than a year.
Okay, Aderonke, you heard what somebody said there about, essentially, the reason that people don't fancy the Rwanda scheme very much is that they're dissing Africa.
Well, I don't think so. It's not about projecting Africa in a wrong or right way. This is about human beings.
But honestly, do you think people would react in the same way if instead of Rwanda we were talking about Canada, which quite likes having immigrants?
I'm sure people will still react the same way, especially in a place where there's no oversight. Because right here in the UK, we have seen problems from the government, especially in detention centres, where there's no oversight to see what's going on there for people that have been detained. How do you monitor people from here that would be taken to Rwanda, offshoring? In fact, we're talking about stopping people smuggling. To me, the government is kind of doing the same thing, wanting to send people to Rwanda.
Okay.
Which I think it's not right, because in fact when you look at people that are seeking asylum that are LGBTIQ, that's another problem there.
Okay.
The government impact assessment says that LGBTIQ people are not safe in Rwanda. Then why does the government want to send people to
So the
LGBTIQ
problem is
to
Rwanda, you're saying, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. Let's talk again to Connor. Connor Summerall, in Mansfield, aren't you, Connor? Hello again.
Yeah.
You've got a question for our panel.
Yeah, after seeing that Suella Breaverman's continuing with the immoral Rwanda policy and then using insensitive language like the invasion on our southern border that's particularly insensitive with what's happening in Ukraine, I'm just wondering, is she up to the job of Home Secretary?
Thank you so much, Connor, for that direct question. Is Suella Breaverman up to the job of Home Secretary? I'm wondering what you're thinking, Stephen Kinnock.
No, she's not. She should either resign or be sacked by Rishi Sunak. She has breached the ministerial code on a number of occasions. We've also seen there are very well-resourced stories saying that articles in newspapers and also from her own backbench MPs. Roger Gale, the MP for North Thanet in the chamber today, said when Suella Breaverman took over, that's when the problems in Manston started, because she stopped transferring people from Manston to other hotels. That led to the crisis we have in Manston now. Outbreaks of diphtheria, scabies. These are not the sort of things we should be seeing in 2022 in the United Kingdom, in what is supposed to be a civilized society. So because of her cruelty and because of her incompetence, the Home Secretary should resign. One word, if I may, on Rwanda.
Yeah.
It is unworkable, it is unaffordable, and it is unethical. It is not acting as a deterrent, and it is costing millions, and it's not right to offload our problems onto a developing country thousands of miles away.
Okay, I'm going to come to Rob on the Rwanda question in a moment, but Natalie Elphicke, do you want to respond on the specific question about Suella Breaverman and her appropriateness?
Well, over the last week or so in Dover, we've seen these boat landings that we've spoken about and these terrifying instances for residents in my constituency. We've seen the dreadful situation of overcrowding, which is at the cause of the problems at Manston. And we've also seen the absolutely horrific firebombing in the Dover facility just on Sunday, which I do think we should also mention in this context. But what did Labour want to talk about today? What do Labour want to talk about all the time? They want to talk about who Suella Breaverman sends emails to. I think that my constituents and I want to talk about how we're going to get this issue fixed and how we're going to make sure that we stop the small boats crossing crisis and we save lives.
Okay, I'll let you say that, but the question he asks is Suella Breaverman up to the job?
Well, I think she needs to be able to focus on the job that she's doing, and that's what I want to see. I want to see us really concentrating on sorting out the small boats crossings. It's such an important issue, and we need to make sure that the Home Secretary...
I don't want to go on about it, but it's not a ringing endorsement there.
Well, I think that we need to see action taken on the small boats crossings,
Okay.
and as I've set out, there are a number of ways in which we can do that. But the situation that's happened in my constituency over the last week has been incredibly serious, and it needs urgently to be addressed.
All right, let's go back to Rwanda, the Rwanda question that was raised earlier, and Rob McNeil. Is this arrangement so unique? I mean, I think there are third country removals elsewhere, aren't there?
There are some. I mean, Australia famously undertook those things. They don't do offshoring anymore. They stopped in 2014. I think the thing with the Rwanda policy that's worth understanding is that it's effectively a symbolic policy. It's about sending a message about what the UK is going to do rather than actually doing something substantial. The number of people that would potentially be removed to Rwanda is extremely small compared to the number of people that are arriving on small boats. So the presumption is that it's going to act as a deterrent. Now, as we were discussing earlier on, I mean, the presumption that the sea would act, that the sea and that the risk of death would act as a deterrent and stop people from crossing over with the securitisation of the port of Calais was not successful. There's no real evidence that the deterrent effect of the Rwanda policy will be necessarily effective. And what we do know is it's extremely expensive and something of a distraction from what may be the really big problems that should be addressed, such as the clearing of the asylum backlog. And clearing the asylum backlog is in everybody's interest. It's extraordinarily expensive for the country to have to deal with more than 100,000 asylum seekers.
That's a very important point. But what is the key to that? Because we now know that the average time taken to turn round an application, I think, is today 480 days. So the best part of a year and a half. But why is it? What takes so long?
Well, it's a very difficult question to answer. What we do know is that there was a service standard that was expected that was abandoned in 2019. And that service standard was that 80% of asylum claims would be processed within 6 months. Because that was dropped in early 2019, or after that was dropped in early 2019, we saw a very, very substantial decline in processing time, or an increase in processing times. So that last year, in 2018, 87% of asylum claims were processed within, or were initial claims were processed within 6 months. In 2021, it was down to 6%. So the key, the Home Office does need to focus on spending money where that money is going to be best and most effective.
Okay, thank you very much. You're watching The Great Debate. Coming up after the break, Britain's employers are complaining they can't get the staff. Should it be easier to hire migrants?
Workers have been on labour force shrinks.
Shortage of labour cost us £250 million in May.
The idea that you can overnight close down the borders and not allow in critical skills that we clearly aren't going to grow in Britain soon, that's just putting growth second, not first.
Immigration has to reflect the needs of the economy. I recognise it's a big issue for businesses, and they've got to accept that the public have concerns about that too.
Welcome back to The Great Debate, where we're asking, how do we solve Britain's immigration dilemma? From telecoms to farming to construction to the health and social care sectors, there are staff shortages. Record vacancies might seem like a good idea to some, means low unemployment. But companies are struggling to fill the jobs, and that means they can't grow. So should we turn to migrants to plug the gap? Let's talk to Cheryl in Bournemouth. Cheryl, you work in a nursery, I think.
I do. I run a group of day nurseries, and we are desperately short of staff, which means that we're having to turn parents away with their children. So we see immigration as a really good way to bring graduates into the country, but there are massive hold-ups. We're not even on the short staff list with the Home Office. So I've got a question, how can we use immigration to fill this gap? Or how else can we fill the labour shortage that we've got in early years?
Thank you, Cheryl. Louise Brown in Sunderland. Do you have the same problem?
I think that we do need more immigration, yes. Since Brexit, there's been huge gaps in services due to shortage of staff. So here in Sunderland, we used to have lots of Polish bus drivers, for example, and now a lot have returned home. The buses simply don't run properly and are very unreliable, and I'm dreading getting on them tomorrow. It's not just buses though, there's also shortages everywhere, so agriculture and food industry. And British workers clearly don't always want to fill these roles.
Okay, hold that thought, Louise. Hold that thought, Louise, because I think that's a very important point. Rob McNeil, it's a big problem, isn't it?
Well, it's certainly a challenge, but a lot of this is about low-skilled migration. When I say low-skilled, I don't want to be pejorative about this. We're just talking about jobs that don't require a lot of training to before you're qualified to do them. But those are the people that can't come into the country now, and that's effectively as a result of Brexit. People voted specifically to try and reduce the number of low-skilled migrants coming into the UK, and that was very specifically the objective of the policy. It was the objective of Brexit. The government has basically said they want to move to a high-skill, high-wage economy, and so yes, it creates serious problems. But the question is, are those problems that people are willing to accept in return for lower migration, particularly lower skilled migration.
Okay. Stephen Kinnock, is part of the problem here British workers are, well, they don't want to do certain jobs, but they also don't want too many migrants because the unions think that they bring down wages.
You need a balance. We're not going to go back to free movement of labour. That's clear. That's clearly Labour's policy. We need a points-based immigration system, but we need one that's based on proper dialogue between trade unions and the government and employers, so that you have a workforce plan on a sector-by-sector basis, and that plan says, this is the amount of immigration we're going to need, and this is how we're going to train up our local workers and pay them properly, thus making it more attractive to homegrown talent, but without letting the sector collapse because you don't allow enough immigration to come in.
But is the net result of that actually we will have more immigrants, more migrants doing work?
I see it as a balancing out, so that you will need in some sectors immigration to ensure that the sector can keep functioning, and we're seeing real problems in hospitality, in health and social care, in agriculture. But so bring the migrants in, but make sure that you make the employers give you a proper workforce plan with proper recruitment, proper way of putting wages up, developing skills and productivity. That's the deal that the government should be doing with trade unions and employers, so that over a time cycle, maybe 2-3 years, you're reducing immigration and increasing homegrown talent and opportunities. What you can't, though, do is just turn the tap off, because that's really dangerous for the sector and for the economy.
All right, I wish we could talk about it more, but we can't. We have to go to a break. You're watching The Great Debate. There are no silver bullets to this immigration dilemma, but has even talking about it become too scary? Should we, can we, start a more honest conversation about the future of immigration?
They've come to seek work in Britain and are ready and willing to do any kind of job that will help the motherland along the road to prosperity.
There is no doubt that on the doorstep, in local communities, immigration has suddenly become very high on the agenda.
All these Eastern Europeans welcoming in. Where are they flocking from?
We're cutting immigration across the board.
Which party is serious about stopping the invasion on our southern coast?
Welcome back to The Great Debate, where we're asking, how do we solve Britain's immigration dilemma? Suella Breaverman isn't the first Home Secretary to run into trouble over immigration. She probably won't be the last. Every government promises to grasp the nettle, but the issue never seems to be solved. Worse still, it's one of the topics that seems to make every politician uncomfortable. So can we ever have an open and honest national debate without finger-pointing and accusations of racism? Let's see if we can start that. Let's talk to Ray Price in, I gather, and rainy Neath in South Wales.
It is indeed, Trevor. It's absolutely hammering down here. Good evening, panel.
A question
for you is, yes, do we need more honesty from our politicians when it comes to immigration, as they seem to promise everything but deliver nothing?
Aderonke, not a politician.
Thank you for the question. I think that is very, very important. The politicians should be very, very frank and honest with everybody. It is time to break down the system that is in operation right now, because they're just not working. It's just too convoluted. It's got to be broken, and people need to be honest about it and face reality and make sure that everybody has honest debate and contribution into how it works. For instance, I just go back to that before we went on break, just to add to what Stephen said. We are talking about people working. There are people in this country also who are seeking asylum that are not allowed to work, and they have good skills, brilliant skills that they can contribute into this country. Why are they not being allowed to work?
Actually, that is a question that I think it would be good to put to our viewers' panel. Aderonke has just asked the question, should asylum seekers be allowed to work? She says they have skills. Other people say that that would encourage people to take this route. Let's see. Those who think that asylum seekers ought to be able to be allowed to work if they are in the country, hands up. Those who think that they ought to be able to work. And we're going to That is very interesting. That is very interesting. An overwhelming majority then, Natalie, Elphicke, think that if asylum seekers make it into the country, while they're waiting for their refugee status to be regularised or not, they should be allowed to work. What do you think?
I think it's really important, if we're having that honest conversation, to look at why people are coming into the country, particularly on the small boats routes. We know that the majority at the moment are coming from Albania, are economic migrants rather than asylum seekers, as most people would understand it. So it is about work and about those draws to work. So I think it's really important that we just bear that in mind.
Stephen Kinnock, both Labour governments and Conservative governments in the past have held the line on this one and said asylum seekers can't work.
Well, asylum seekers are allowed to work after 12 months. Our position has actually been, and we tried to amend the Nationality and Borders Bill on this, to reduce that to 6 months. We believe that every single asylum claim should be processed within 6 months, and every person should be given leave to remain if they have passed and granted asylum and be able to work from 6 months. The government refused our amendment and insisted that it should be 12 months.
So
and I think
that is
that's
a change
waste.
in the Labour position. You think that actually at some point they ought to be able to work even if they haven't got refugee status yet?
Yes, no, well, we want all refugee processing to happen within 6 months. But even if it hasn't, from 6 months onward, they should be allowed to work. The current ruling is they can work after 12 months, but only in the shortage occupation lists.
Thank you very much indeed. That is all we have time for this evening. I just want to say thank you to all our panelists this evening. And I'm going to, actually before we go, I just want to check with our viewers panel. Stephen Kinnock says that actually we could have the opportunity for asylum seekers to work before they've got full status. Can I just quickly see who agrees with that position? Who thinks that would be a good thing to do? Yeah, and we've got a majority there. Thank you for giving me the extra time to be able to do that. That is actually all we have time for this evening now. And it now just remains for me to say thank you to our panelists.
And so, in a nutshell, what we're getting from the great debate is that the issues to do with UK migration for essential services, the general majority of the panel actually agrees that UK needs more migration to fill in the essential services. With Suella Breaverman being the person for Home Office, I think it was overwhelming that people are not satisfied with the fact that she had breached ministerial code and therefore unfit to hold the position for Home Secretary. And so this is, it's real. And so that really concludes the great debate for this week.